Any ad that her competitors need to put together was just done. It's all there. That will play over and over again. And it's not one of those things that will really kind of go away. Every time someone rewatches it in the next 15 days, they're going to go, ooh, that's right. That was terrible. That's exactly who Katie Porter is.
Kevin Dalton is a political activist prominent on X, known for his commentary on California politics, love of the state, and conservative viewpoint. Kevin Dalton, welcome to State of Gold.
Thank you so much for having me.
Your energy's good. How are you doing today?
Fantastic. In the beautiful state of Idaho, just outside of Boise, 78 degrees, about to turn to winter. Doesn't get much better.
It's a beautiful state, and I wish I could say that California overall we're doing as well. Such a tough time for California, and what a crazy news week. There are a few topics I want to cover together. Katie Porter's implosion, the cost of energy in California. You've been posting in this on X. You've got a great X handle and your content there. And then the Palisades fires, the arrest of this Uber driver who allegedly started the fire that slow burned and then exploded and just ruined that amazing neighborhood. Let's start with Katie Porter. I think by now everyone's seen these viral videos. Millions have watched them. This interview with Julie Watts, CBS California, where essentially she was about to rip off her mic when asked to answer basic questions about appealing to Republicans in California. The theory being that if you're a Democrat and you want to win statewide, you should really be thinking about appealing beyond your party. What does this reveal, Kevin, about her candidacy? Where does this go?
It was so perfect and enlightening to what Democrats normally go through with interviews with quote unquote journalists. There's zero sort of pushback, and I think Katie thought she could just go in there and be glib and sarcastic, and who needs 40%, Trump voters, and normally all the reporters would have gone ha 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 ha, and moved right on, but there was a basic follow-up question and Katie crumbled. I mean, it was bordering on a teenager's temper tantrum where she was going to pull off her mic and walk away. And the only thing I can think of is behind the cameras were all of her handlers waving their arms like going, no, please try to stick with this and salvage this. And it just somehow continued to get worse. This is, I mean, for a campaign of a leading candidate to literally implode over a 3-minute interview is fascinating. College courses will be taught about these 3 minutes.
Yeah, so there are people chattering now that this is it for her. She's not going to recover. That seems like hyperbole to me, but how bad was it in your view for her candidacy and the true colors shown?
Well, any ad that her competitors need to put together was just done. It's all there. That will play over and over again. And it's not one of those things that will really kind of go away. Every time someone rewatches it in the next 15 days, they're going to go, ooh, that's right. That was terrible. That's exactly who Katie Porter is. This is, I mean, anyone, oh man, I can't think of, Villaraigosa. Yeah, Antonio Villaraigosa is the happiest man on the planet right now. No one basically remembers who he was or the damage he did to Los Angeles. And now all of a sudden, this guy who had essentially no chance, I think it's a gigantic foot in the door for him. I mean, Alex Padilla, who's been kind of pretending to not dip a toe into this race, I imagine is going to jump in all of a sudden. Whether Katie drops out or not, it just opened a gigantic hole for a whole lot of other people to jump in.
Yeah, sure thing. That's well put. Zooming out for a second, Kevin, in terms of the race, of course, we're over a year out. A ton is going to happen between here and November of 2026. I mean, God knows, including potential October surprises next year. Where do you think the race is today?
I have no idea. Steve Hilton looks great on the right. There's Sheriff. Oh, geez, Kevin.
Bianco?
Yes, Bianco out of Riverside. There's great options for California. The information that just came out earlier this week about the voter registration, I thought was tremendous. I think since February, 109 Democrats have registered to vote in California. And it was, 50,000 Republicans and close to 80,000 non party preference, which, look, there's still a huge advantage for Democrats in the state. But man, is that some momentum. I think it's very positive. What happens in November with Prop 50, I think is going to set the pace for the state, not only for the election in 2026, but 2028. I think November for me is a lot more about Gavin. It's a lot more than just Gavin Newsom's redistricting scheme. It is the fate of California for the next 10 or 20 years.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And you mentioned, of course, November 4th, Prop 50, which I just went down to San Diego this past Saturday and debated Chris Ward, who's a Democratic assemblyman from the 78th district in California, which is San Diego. I, of course, debated the no on 50. He voted yes. We're going to put out some short content today on this because he said something really stunning, which kind of mirrors the Katie Porter gaffe. When the moderator, Joey Safchik, who's an NBC reporter in San Diego, said, "Hey, Chris, what do you say to the hundreds of thousands of Republicans in San Diego who'll be disenfranchised if Prop 50 passes?" He said, "Well, they'll get better representation from Democrats." And I think it's almost like a mirror image of Katie Porter's position, which is, you know what? Democrats should run the show. There shouldn't be any Republicans. And God bless you if you get more Democratic representation because we'll do better for you because we know what's best.
Yeah, it's such an elitist take, and that's exactly what it is. We know better. So you may be disenfranchised, but guess what? You're going to be disenfranchised with us, and we're elites, and we're better. It's so gross,
It's
and
gross.
they root in it like pigs too. They don't. I feel like at some point there was some decorum, or they would try to pretend that that's not who they were. But this is exactly who they are. They are telling you. I mean, this is Maya Angelou from the beginning. When they tell you who they are the first time, believe them. And they're telling us time and time again.
They are. Okay. We beat that dead horse, I think, Kevin. Let's move on to something that you've posted about a lot and I've talked about a lot on this podcast, which is the cost of things in California, the cost of energy. I believe that you posted recently on LADWP and some of the crazy monthly costs for consumers experiencing on their utility and electric bills in Los Angeles. I know how big my bill is here in Northern California. It's insane. You must get a lot of feedback on this from your fans and your listeners. What is your view on what's driving this, Kevin, and how should we think about it? Changing it for the better.
Well, the only thing I can really just point out is other examples of where it's not like that, which is pretty much everywhere else in the country. I don't know why utilities, why these evil oil companies, and why they're just gouging California. If I were an evil billion-dollar corporation, I would gouge all 50 states evenly so no one knew I was gouging. That seems to be what evil gougers would do. But no, it's just California where gas is at, $1.80 a gallon more than everywhere else. Electricity, you just mentioned DWP rates went up like 54% for some of their users. Southern California Edison just gave a $56 rebate. They're like, hey, $56 rebate, everyone. Aren't we awesome? And then in the same letter had a 34% rate increase overall. And, Gavin Newsom's campaign donors, it doesn't hurt to donate to that guy because all of a sudden rates go up and there's nothing anyone can do about it because, oh, you need electricity? Sorry, this is all you got. It's a terrible scam, and it's not just electricity, it's housing, it's food. Everything is so much more expensive than it needs to be, and it's again just California being gouged.
Yeah, it's such a good point, Kevin. I think my reflection as a private sector leader before becoming a podcaster is that California has things backwards. California believes that if the government imposes more and more restrictions and regulations on the private sector, on climate in the service of environmentalism, that will produce great outcomes. And it's produced the opposite. All of our inputs are more expensive for California energy. Our labor is much more expensive. The people who work in energy, the regulation, cap and what's called now cap and invest is, again, environmentalism is a great goal. We all want to be environmentalists, but we have more environmental laws on the books than anywhere else in the world in California. If we just enforced them and released all the other regulations on industry, we'd bring costs down dramatically. And let's move on to Palisades fire. Like you, I've got plenty of friends and colleagues who lost everything there, and that tragedy lives on. And now we've got an arrest of a 28-year-old, I think, Uber driver who started the fire. Kevin, what's your take on this, and where do we go from here on this tragedy?
Yeah, it was really interesting when Gavin Newsom pointed about this, posted about it. The first thing he said was a Florida resident, and then gave his name and started talking about it. So there's also, it seems to be some extenuating circumstances. They found some weird Chat GPT images that he made of burning cities, and he may have had there may have been some pyromaniac things going on here, because what it seemed like at first was New Year's Eve, he goes out, lights a firework like an absolute idiot in the Palisades, where it's just unmanaged brush, and started a fire. LAFD comes out, puts out the fire. That's it, and they walk away from it. Well, 7 days later, this fire reignites, and the Palisades fire. A dozen people die, thousands of homes and businesses are lost, and now this guy is arrested for essentially causing the Palisades fire. I certainly think there should be some repercussions. I mean, if you start a forest fire because it was a gender reveal party for your baby, or you're just not putting out your campfire all the way, for whatever the reasons, you should be held responsible. The difference with this is there is a 7-day period where Los Angeles Fire Department came in, put out the fire, which I believe was on a state park. Gavin Newsom doesn't want you to know about that. And then this fire reignites. So I have a hard time holding this one guy culpable for the whole entire tragedy when there is a week in between. He should certainly be held responsible for the fire that he started, but it gets a little murky. It gets a little gray from there. I think we've got to start asking some questions of LAFD. I think we have to start asking, why wasn't the land where this fire originally started, whether it be on for the Palisades fire or New Year's Eve, why wasn't this land managed? There's so many other questions that need to go into this, but this guy may end up just hold the bag for the whole entire thing, which makes it a whole lot nicer for LAFD and for the people who run the state parks, who don't want you looking at that.
I think you pointed out something really important, which is leaders don't blame shift. Leaders take responsibility. And I think this brings me back, Kevin, to when the fires were raging, and there was a reporter from one of the networks standing with Newsom in the Palisades saying to him, "Does the buck stop with you?" And I think his response was, "Well, the buck stops with a lot of people, and the buck stops with the city, and the buck." He didn't want to say, "You know what, I'm responsible, I'm the leader, and the buck for the state stops with me." I think you've said it exactly right. Leaders don't blame shift. There have been a lot of allegations online and in social media that there is this hidden agenda by the city of Los Angeles to take this land away and do other things with it. Do you think those are valid? Is that hyperbole? Where's that stuff coming from?
I generally like to think that people aren't evil, and this feels kind of evil to me. Do I think that there are people with money who would be more than happy to scoop up the land for pennies on the dollar if they could, and turn around and resell it and profit on it? I absolutely do. I don't know if this is a concerted effort. When it comes to, hey, we're going to rezone things and this single family home is now going to be a 4-story apartment. I think there we're talking about concerted efforts from the city to really kind of change the landscape and the whole entire culture of a community. They can certainly affect it that way. Do I think that Karen Bass wants to come in and occupy all of the Palisades and do her bidding with? I don't think she's evil. I don't even think she's that smart to pull that off. Gavin Newsom's a sociopath. I don't think he's evil. I think he's greedy. So I think will they maybe turn a blind eye to their big investors scooping up a lot of the land? Sure, but I don't think there's an evil cabal that's kind of behind all of this.
I'm glad you said that because I think you're totally right. I think that there probably some stupidity at play, some bad planning at play. The one thing I would say is that I think an opportunity for the Palisades or any community that has this happen is to give more rights to existing property owners with what they do with their property. So, for instance, if I own a patch of land in the Palisades and the Palisades says, hey, we want to zone your neighborhood so that you have the right to put up a tasteful set of townhomes, couple decker, if you want, with your land for your interest, that is actually interesting. But I tend to agree with you. I don't think there's some kind of cabal. Can we talk about your transformation? Because as I've gotten to learn about you and read about you, I found this fascinating. I wrote a catchy phrase, Kevin, from Hollywood to Idaho and actor to activist. Was there a moment where you had like a breaking moment, a snapping moment, or an awakening moment where you said, I'm getting out of here and I'm going to actually take to the airwaves and put out your truth about what's happening to California?
So yes and no. It happened a little like that, but in a slightly different order. I was working in Hollywood at the time, and I was literally on Hollywood Boulevard. And I'd grown up in California, Los Angeles, my whole entire life, and the homeless they just became the background like everyone else. It just became not this weird thing when you pulled off the freeway and there was a homeless encampment there. There were dozens of tents and people living there. And then on the streets, it just became a thing. Working on Hollywood Boulevard changed a lot of that. Met a guy named Derek. And he introduced himself by first coming into our business and screaming and being crazy because he was a homeless dude out of his mind and scared away all the customers. And this happened a dozen times. We called the cops. Nothing would happen because it's LA. And finally I started talking with him and creating I don't I, maybe a friendship. We got to know each other and we started talking. More lucid days he would tell me about his favorite Amy Grant song and Star Wars theories, and other days were much worse. And then one day he started telling me about when he taught crew in a college in DC. And then all of a sudden I was like, oh, damn it. This isn't just crazy Derek who lives on Hollywood Boulevard. This is a guy with a backstory, and he has a family and a history. And it doesn't matter what befell Derek, he needed help. And then it wasn't just Derek. It was all the other people. It was everyone else on the streets that I saw every day. It was the people on the off ramps and the homeless encampments. They were all Derek's. They were all people with backstories and histories and families, and it didn't matter. It was now absurd that they were allowed to live like this. And at that point, I started looking around. I mean, that was my literal awakening. That moment with Derek. And I started looking at people. I was like Eric Garcetti at the time. What the hell is going on here, man? Gavin Newsom, what the hell is going on? And from there, I kind of took to Twitter, and ended up running for board of supervisor when COVID hit because I didn't know what the hell a board of supervisor was. Who knew what that was? It turns out they are wildly powerful people who can just lock you in your home and make you and tell you that your livelihood isn't significant to the population just like that. That's scary. So I decided to try to do something about it. Went up against Hilda Solis, who decimated me with my $5,000 I raised to her $900,000. Political machine is tough to go against when you're doing it for the first time. So after that, I really kind of looked around and I was like, I gave it my best shot. And we had an opportunity, my wife and I, my son was 3, we had an opportunity to leave. So we kind of threw a dart at the United States, and fortunately we hit Boise, Idaho, and haven't looked back. The thing is, I've got 40 years of friends and family and community still there in California that I care very much about. And I want what's better for them. I want Gavin Newsom's policies to stop there in California. I don't want them to come here. I don't want them to spread to the rest of the country. I think people give me a hard time. They look at my X account. They're like, you're from Eagle, Idaho. Why do you care at all about California?" I'm like, "Well, I've been doing this for a
Some
while, and
history.
yeah,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
care very much about what happens to that place. I love California. You don't do much better. The weather, the beaches, the people deep down are quite nice when they're not being beat down by the oppressiveness of the state that beats them down for no reason at all. I would love to figure out a way to solve that.
Well, I look forward to the day when you decide to come back here and a lot of good things have happened and changed and things become more reasonable and sane and safe. And I really appreciate your sharing your awakening because it started with Derek, a homeless guy, and you got to know him as a human and had this awakening like, wow, there's one Derek. There are 187,500 Dereks of different flavors in California. And one thing I learned with Elizabeth Funk, who's the CEO of Dignity Moves, it's probably the best nonprofit in California addressing homelessness with tiny homes and services surrounding the tiny homes, not the $1 million unit permanent housing. 17% of people who are homeless are mentally ill their first month. By another month from then, after being homeless, it goes up to 35% because they've got to get on drugs to stay awake 24/7 or they're going to get robbed or beaten or raped. So just the tragedy of what's going on and the fact that we could house every single Californian who's unhoused for $5 billion sounds like a big number. But under Newsom, we've spent something like $24 billion on homelessness, and it's getting worse. So I love your story because it's so human, and these are human beings, fellow human beings. Let's finish with some rapid fire. And I want to start with this. If you're king for a day, the one word, one phrase, whatever comes to mind, you're king for a day, the single biggest thing you do to fix California.
Enforce laws. Make crime crime again.
Make crime crime. Wow. Yeah, I appreciate that. What gives you hope for California?
Momentum. I think the tide is turning. People are waking up. People are asking harder questions. They're looking at more than just what the politicians in the state are telling them. We have good journalists asking questions. We have great people on social media who are taking to the streets. I think it's really hopeful what's going on.
Well said. Is there a leader, past or present, you admire, you think's had a really positive impact in California?
Ronald Reagan comes to mind. Great leader in the state. Great leader overall. May have been a bit of an issue kicking off the homeless epidemic we're in right now. I'm trying to think of an overall great leader. Man, they are just so hard to come by these days, and trying to think of one outside of the Democrat supermajority that's been plaguing the place for 20 years.
I
I
mean,
don't know.
Reagan's a good pull. But Reagan's been our number one, of course. If you live in California, you used to live in California, and you're a Republican or not a Democrat, Reagan is perfectly acceptable. We love Ronnie Reagan. Let me ask you one last one. Finish this sentence. California is
California is savable.
savable. I completely agree. And of course, it's sad that we have to couch California as savable, given the current status of California, but I think it's honest. And Kevin, I appreciate your activism, your voice, your X account. Everyone should follow you for your commentary. You've got sort of like if you baked the Kevin Dalton bread, you've got some intelligence, some optimism, some snark, some facts. You've got a great mix, a great ingredients with what you're putting out.
I really, really appreciate that. Thank you so much, and really appreciate you having me on.
Thank you again.